Hello and welcome to another Mcreator tutorial, and in this one we are going to be showing you how to make a crop that is double tall, or a 2-block tall crop. First thing I'm going to get out of the way is that you may be tempted to make this as a plant type, because if you add a new plant type, there is already a double tall version right here. However, making your crops as a double tall plant is going to result in some other issues. For example, it is locked as the cross model, not the crop model. So if you wanted to use crop model, it's going to have some issues. Now, that is a little bit ironic because the plant we are making today does use a cross model, not a crop model, but that's neither here nor there. Either way, it's going to be a little bit tricky if you use it as a plant model. So instead, we're just going to hard code some things that the plant model does already and just kind of work around it. So with that disclaimer out of the way, the first thing that we need to do is, as always, create our textures. Now, I already have some textures made, so I'm going to import my block textures, but you can feel free to create yours. So right here we have all of our block textures. You'll notice right away that this is going to be an 8-stage crop. So if we look at all of the bottoms here, you'll notice that there is 8 total stages. And if I go ahead and open them up, I have them named tomato, crop, bottom, stage 0. I find that this is the best practice to name it this way. Technically, if you really want to follow what Minecraft does in the vanilla, you would put an underscore between each word, but I find that to be a little unnecessary. But either way, just make sure that you name all of them using the same naming convention. So if I open the next one, you'll notice it is the exact same naming convention. It just is at stage 1. And then if I open any of these top pieces, they say tomato crop top instead of bottom, stage, whatever stage it is. It really doesn't matter what naming convention you use, just make sure you're consistent, and that should help you in the long run. So now that we have all of our block textures, we are going to need our item textures, which of course is going to be the tomato and the tomato seeds. And just like that, that should be every texture that you need. So we're going to come in here and create a folder for our tomatoes. Now, I will go ahead and warn you, we are going to have to make a special block for every single one of these textures. With Mcreator, we cannot use block states unless you have the block states plugin, which I do highly recommend that you use because it's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of code. But for these tutorials, I don't like using plugins whenever possible, so I will show you how to use it using block states, but we are inevitably going to make it using vanilla code with Mcreator. So you don't need the block states plugin to follow along to this tutorial, but I do highly recommend that you use it anyways, because like I said, it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of code. So if you have the block states plugin, the first thing you're going to do is create a block and call it tomato crop bottom. Now this is all you need for block states, but we are not using block states, so I'm going to go ahead and put stage 7 on the end. We can make this a cross model. If you're using crop model, feel free to use that. And then I'm going to put the stage 7 bottom texture, this one right here, into that. This is a cutout texture, and it will not have any sort of rotation or anything like this. The bounding box is going to be okay, at least for our big crops like this. And then for the properties, I'm just going to change the name to tomato crop, just in case people are using a mod like Jade. When they look at it, it doesn't say this weird long jargon, it'll just say tomato crop. If you want, you can add the word grown on here, and that way, whenever they're looking at it with Jade, people will know that the tomato crop is fully grown. It's not going to have any creative inventory tabs because we don't want the player to actually be able to acquire this block. It's just going to be a visual block that, of course, when broken, drops our tomatoes. We want the hardness and resistance at 0. That will make it so that as soon as you punch it, it breaks immediately. And we want this sound set down here to be crop. We can walk through this block, so make sure that this spot right here is checked. And finally, for custom drops, we're going to make it do a custom loot table. And the creative pick item is going to be a tomato, which we haven't created yet. So let's go ahead and make that tomato item. Come here, press add, item, and name it whatever you want. For us, it's going to be tomato, and we're going to select this tomato texture here. We're going to go skip over the item states, and then go to properties, tomato. We can add this to food and drinks. All of the rest of these stats are totally fine with me, but we're going to have to go to food properties, check to enable, And if it's at 4, we're going to want to put this at roughly 2.4. Now you can mess with these however you want, but this works for me. You'll notice back here, as soon as we checked that it is food, it automatically sets the item animation to eating and our use duration to 32, which is perfect. We don't really have any advanced properties or triggers, so we can just go ahead and save. Now we can go back to our crop, change the pick item to the tomato. For the advanced properties, this is our fully grown stage, so it's not going to tick randomly at all. And for the color on the map, I want to go ahead and make it a plant. Reaction to being pushed should be destroyed, and the rest of this should all be fine. We don't have block entity, don't have any fluid, and of course we will have a few triggers, I believe. Maybe not for this one, but definitely for our other ones, but for now, we'll just leave them empty. Next, we're going to want to duplicate this and call it tomato crop top stage 7. Now, most of our settings are perfect, except we want to change this texture to the top stage 7 here, and that should be all for now. So let's go ahead and save this. We're going to duplicate this one more time. Now that we have our fully grown versions, I like to start at the beginning and work up. So let's go tomato crop bottom stage 0. Now, if you are using block stage, these two are the only ones that you need. And like I said, you don't need to put that stage 7 in there. All you have to do is call this tomato crop top, and all you have to do is call this one tomato crop bottom. At this point, you would add a block state and call it tomato crop bottom or top. You're going to need one for each, and then name it block states at the end. In here is where you would add all the different versions for your crop. So every time we create a new tomato crop bottom here, if you're using block states, create a new block state and change the texture, the model, and the bounding box according to whatever we make it here, and then you should be good to go with your block states. But we're using full blocks, so for this one, we're going to make this tomato crop bottom stage 0. Select, and this does have a slightly different bounding box, so let's open this texture and kind of guess what that's going to be. Looks like it goes about 4 pixels in each direction, so that means that this starting value should be 4 and ending value should be about 8. And it looks like it only goes about 5 pixels tall. So we're going to come into the bounding box, change the starting value to be 4, starting value to be 4, ending value to be 8, ending value to be 8 on here, and then the ending value here to be 5. This should be pretty good for our tomato crop bottom stage 0. Now this is not a tomato crop grown, so I'm just going to call this tomato crop. It's going to have the same pick item, the same drop, the same noises, all of these same values, except if we go to advanced properties, this is going to tick randomly. We can now save this mod element, close this PNG file. We're going to have to open the next PNG file because that's where it's going to tell us what the bounding box for this one should be. Let's duplicate that bottom stage and call it tomato crop bottom stage 1. At this point, you probably know the drill. Let's come in here, change the texture, select, change the bounding box. Looks like this bounding box is only about 3 on each end, and it looks like it goes up by about 8. So we're going to change this from 4 to 3, not 33, 3, and then change this from 8 to 9. Excuse me. I am just realizing that I did something really silly. This first one here shouldn't go to 8. It should actually go to 12. So this needs to be 4, and this needs to be 12. Sorry about that. Which means that these need to be 13, 13, and this one should be 8. You'll notice that down here, this has a block states option. So you may be thinking, why would I need a block states plugin if I can do block states right here? Well, this block state supports various block properties, but not exactly block states. You still cannot change the texture based on these properties or anything like that, so it doesn't have complete full block states support yet. However, we do believe that this is coming either in an early 2025 update or possibly in the 2024.4 update, which should be releasing very, very shortly. So if you want to see that video, make sure to press subscribe and stick around because I will be making a video covering all the changes when that update comes out. But back to the tutorial, let's go in here, and all of this should be good, so we can go ahead and save mod element. Now, every time we duplicate this from here on out, it's just going to be a matter of changing the name when you duplicate it, changing the texture after you duplicate it, and then then of course changing the bounding box. So I'm not going to bore you with all of the details. I'm just going to finish doing all of that like I said, and then we'll catch you when I'm done. So once you've duplicated all of the bottoms that you need, you're then going to have to do the same for the top. So let's go ahead and duplicate the first one again and call it tomato crop top stage 3, or whatever the first stage you have for your top is, but my first stage is going to be 3. This is going to be the same deal of changing the texture, the name can be the same, and then changing the bounding box. So here we are, we now have all of our crop stages, and like I said, it was going to be a lot of extra code on your end. If you are using block states, you should only have this one right here, and this one right here, and then 2 block states, one for each of them, one for the bottom, and one for the top. But now is when we need to add all of the code that makes the crop go from one to the next, and of course we need to add our tomato seeds. So let's start with the seeds by adding another item and calling them tomato seeds. Select our texture there, go into properties, tomato seeds, add these to the creative tab, and these are going to be in, what are they stored in vanilla? Or food and drinks? Food and drinks, I guess. But these are going to have our first trigger, of course, when they are right-clicked on a block. So let's go ahead and add a tomato seeds right-clicked on block procedure right here. And I'm going to go ahead and write out this code and then explain to you what I've done. All right, so here we are. Whenever tomato seeds are right-clicked on a block, we're doing all of these checks, and if they are all true, then we plant our crop. So the first check is that there is a light level at 0.5. Now this just centers our check at the very center of the block. And then checking at plus 3.5 means that we are checking about 3 blocks above where we placed. So if this was 1.5, that would be the block directly above where we placed. 2.5 is the one above that, but because this is, and that's what this would usually be, but because this is a double tall crop, we actually need to check 3.5. And if that light level is greater than 7, or we have access to the sky, in a situation where we have access to the sky and this would not be true is at night, so this is still a valid check. We need this or here. And if there is air at the block above it, now you could also check if there is air 2 blocks above it as well, you know, to make sure that we have space to grow. But personally, I'm okay with it being planted and not checking that there is space to grow, because on our grow procedure, we are checking that there is space. So there is really no reason to do that check now, at least in my opinion. But you could always add another and here and check both if you wanted. And then we're checking that the block we clicked on is a farmland block. Now, if you have multiple types of farmland in your mod or multiple types of blocks that this can grow on, you're going to have to use a tag, which is very simple. All you got to do is come in here and then use this block instead, get block at X, and make sure that it is tagged as your farmland tag. If you don't know how to use tags, we're going to be using them later in the tutorial, so just take a mental note of this and stick around so that you know when to use the tag, or how to use the tags. Now, these are seeds, so as soon as they get planted, if the player does not have the husbandry advancement, then we are going to give them the husbandry advancement for planting a seed. We're then going to place our crop bottom with block state set to 7 or 0, or whatever your youngest block state is. If it's 1, then set it to 1. But I do recommend setting it to 7. That way you can kind of just increment 7 to 6 to 5 to 4 to 3 to 1 to 0. And 0 is always going to be your fully grown stage. But we are not using block states in this tutorial, so we don't need to set its block state. All we have to do is place this block at Y+1. That's placing it above the farmland. Then play the crop plant sound of category block, and then if they're not in creative mode, we're going to take those seeds out of their inventory. But that is pretty much it for this one. And I also believe that's all the triggers that we need. So if we go ahead and save that, our tomato seeds are now done. However, our tomato crop here needs to update tick, otherwise it's never gonna grow. So let's add a on update tick procedure. This stage 0 is unimportant, and so is this bottom part as well. In fact, all we need is a single tomato crop update tick or on tick update procedure, and this can be handled for every single stage along the way. Let's go ahead and create this procedure, and I'll catch you when I have finished. So this is a pretty complicated procedure, and you don't have to duplicate all of this if you don't want to, but this does mimic or mirror what vanilla crop update ticks do every time a vanilla crop is trying to grow. So let's walk you through it real quick. If you don't want your crops to mirror the vanilla growth stage, then all you need is this right here. If random number is less than or equal to some points value that you can decide whatever you want your likelihood of increasing every tick to be, then do this. But instead, we're going to mirror our vanilla crop growth state right here by running all of the checks that the vanilla crops do, then getting our points value and comparing our random number to that. The first thing we're going to do is check that light level again, and then check that farmland again, just in case something has changed. And as long as all this stuff is still okay, then we're going to go ahead and try and grow our crop. If this stuff is not true, then we have an else down here where we are going to call our procedure for our tomato crop being destroyed, play the sound of the crop breaking, and then remove the block of at that spot. We don't have this procedure yet, but we will make it shortly after this and before we save this so that we don't have any conflicting issues. Let's hop into this part of the procedure right here and talk about what happens whenever we do have a successful update tick. The first thing we're going to do is once again check the light level and make sure that it is greater than 9. Now you may be thinking, hey, shouldn't this be at 3.5? But no, actually 1.5 is just fine, because if we have a light level of 9 at 3.5, we probably have a light level of 9 at 1.5, because that's kind of how light works. It travels downwards. So this is totally fine, and I think that this is a good check. Next, we're going to do this loop right here. So if it is not raining in the world, then we run this long piece of code here. Else, if it's raining, we're checking and setting hydrated to true. So what we're doing here is we're checking to see if our farmland is hydrated, or if we have a valid water source nearby. If it's not raining, we're going to assume that it's hydrated as false. Then set this local number variable over here, not that one, this one, row to 3. And then while hydrated is still not true, because as soon as it's true, we can break out of this loop and we don't want to do this anymore. But while hydrated is still false or not true, and row is greater than -4, then we're going to set count to -3. And while count is less than 4, then we are going to run this check, and we are checking pretty much every single spot around it up to 4 blocks away to see if there is any water source nearby that could possibly be hydrating this farmland. I'm not going to bother explaining all of this because it can get really confusing really quickly, but if you want, you can easily just copy and paste this, or you can cut this condition out. Or you can just have it check if it's raining or whatever you want to do. But if we do find some water, then we are going to set hydrated to true, break out of the loop, and then because hydrated is true here, we're going to break out of this loop and we'll be done. Else, we're going to increment count up by 1 until count is greater than or equal to 4. And then it will break out and enter this while loop. And then this while loop is going to run until row is less than 4. We subtract 1 every time. And this is a while loop that's pretty much going to check in a 4x4 area around us for water and make sure that we are either hydrated or not hydrated. Then we set this local number points to 0, and we'll set row back to 1, because if we are hydrated, then we're going to run another while loop, and if we are not hydrated, then we're going to run this while loop. And these while loops are pretty much the same. The only real difference is how many points we are giving because if we are hydrated, we give 0.75 points, and if we are not hydrated, we give 0.25 points. Now, I do have an else if here, and that's because if you have any other types of farmland, then you might want to give additional points. For example, if we had a type of farmland here that was always hydrated, such as, a fertilized dirt, then we would always want to give 1 point, but we don't, so we can go ahead and just remove this and all these else ifs here, and they are pretty much unnecessary. So because we don't have any other special types of farmland, really all we need is this right here. If we are hydrated, then we're running pretty much the same loop, but we're giving 0.75 points instead of 0.25 points. And this is, once again, checking every area immediately around us for adjacent hydrated farmland and giving us additional points for that. Then we're going to take points and set them equal to 1 over 25 over the number of points we already have plus 1. This is going to be really complicated, but this is the algorithm that vanilla crops use. I don't know why, I don't know how, but this is important. Just make sure that this is rounded down, 25 divided by our local points, then we add 1 to that, and then we do 1 divided by that number, and that's what our points now equal. So our next step is going to be to figure out what crop patterns we have of the same type of crop we are trying to grow. And if we have an invalid crop pattern, then we are going to cut our points in half. So if you did not know, crops actually grow quicker if they are grown in a straight line with the same type of crop, the same way that you see them grown in villages. Believe it or not, villagers actually have it right. That is the fastest way to grow crops, having them in a straight line and not having any of the same crop touching itself adjacently other than in that straight line. So this first OR is checking if we have a crop at any of our diagonal corners. If we have any crops in our corners, we know immediately to cut our points in half. What we're doing here is we're checking to see if our crops are not grown in a straight line. If this was an and, then a straight line would also cut this in half, but because these are ORs, if we have a straight line going one way and a straight line going the other way, it cuts it in half, because technically that's a plus or some weird diagonal thing. Trust me, if you want to do this, just mirror this exactly. And if you're using block states, all you have to do is make sure that they are the same block as your tomato crop grown stage. However, because we are using multiple blocks in this tutorial, we're going to have to set up tags and use them. So then we're going to come back to our workspace over here, go to element tags and add a new tag of type blocks. This is going to be the mod namespace, so we can use mod right here. And then we're going to change this tag to tomato underscore crop. Press OK. And then we're going to want to add all of our tomato crops to that tag. Do note, you technically only have to add the bottom pieces because there should never be a top part of the crop right next to you. So really all we have to do is add our tomato crop bottom parts. Now, if you want to figure out what your mod namespace is, all you have to do is come up here into workspace settings, mod ID namespace, double crop tutorial. So this is what our namespace is going to be. We can go ahead and copy that, but you can use whatever your namespace is. Let's go ahead and save these changes, come back in here, go into data, and then pick this block. We can delete this, put this right here instead, change this to our mod namespace, tomato underscore crop. Or what would go after this colon here is whatever you named your tag right here. Ours is tomato underscore crop. So this works just fine. Let's go ahead and do that, and then I'll copy and paste this, putting it in all of these spots right here. So there we go, I've successfully changed them all to use tags. And just like that, we should be good. Next, we're going to set a random number here. And if that random number is less than or equal to our points value, then we're going to run the procedure that update ticks and increases our growth stage. Now, if you're using block states, this is really all you have to do. If current block state is the lowest block state, increase it by 1. If it's that next block state, increase it by 1, and keep going like this Don't forget that once you increase to whatever block state has your top part, you're gonna have to add the top part above your current crop. But other than that, that's pretty much it, just incrementing through all of your block states. However, we're not using block states, so instead of checking that, we're going to use the logic tag down here, is same block as. Then we can come into Minecraft components, and then do data, and is get block at XYZ, the one that is ticking, the same block as our smallest crop, and if so, then we are going to replace it with our next growth stage, and we are not going to keep state or NBT inventory because it doesn't have any. If it did have any, we probably would want to keep it though. Then we can get rid of this, and it's pretty much all the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and change this from block states to our version, and just like that, we have it all changed. Now you may be thinking, once we've placed this top piece on here, shouldn't we have to then replace it every time we regrow or replace our one below it? And the answer is no. We will actually handle that in a trigger for the top piece, so this is totally fine, and the other one is unnecessary. So we can go ahead and collapse this, and just like that, we are good to go. The only thing that we're going to have to do is make our tomato crop destroyed procedure before we can proceed and save this. So go ahead, double check, just make sure that everything you have mirrors what I have exactly. I will really quickly go ahead and expand all of these again so that you can take a good look at them. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Hopefully you got this. 3, 2, 1. All right, remember, all that stuff is only necessary if you want your own crops to mirror vanilla crops, else you can set your own special points value here at some decimal number less than 1. Let's go ahead and make our tomato crop destroyed procedure, but save and keep this open. And the way we're going to be able to save that is by having this not actually connect right here so that we don't get the error that we're calling a procedure that doesn't exist. Next up, we want to come down here, and when the block is destroyed by explosion. Now we don't need this stage 0 here, and personally I don't like having the word block in there either, but we do need this bottom part we will have separate ones for the bottom pieces and the top pieces. I also don't think the word by explosion is necessary. I just think that tomato crop bottom destroyed is perfectly fine. This one's going to be pretty simple. If the game rule do tile drops is turned on, then we run this, and if not, then we have nothing else to do. But what we need to drop here is our tomato item here. And if you're running block states, then this works perfectly fine. So if the current block state is whatever block state you want it to drop tomatoes at, then go ahead and drop our tomatoes. And this one I think is checking specifically if it's 1 or 0. Else we're just dropping our seeds. Now for this instance, I really only want it to drop tomatoes if it is fully grown. That's going to mirror vanilla crops, and we're not using block state, so we can go ahead and get this stuff out of here. Do a logic, and if block at XYZ, the one that had been broken, is the same block as our fully grown tomato bottom stage, then we'll drop tomatoes and some seeds, else we will only drop the seeds. We can go ahead and save this mod element. Now, even though you have this here in block destroyed by explosion, it's never actually going to trigger or drop anything properly because, of course, the block is already destroyed. So this check that we're doing to check for that block is always going to fail, and it's always only going to drop seeds because it doesn't know. It simply does not know what block it was before it was destroyed. This plays after it has been destroyed. But I still like having it there. You don't really have to set a procedure in here if you don't want to, but this procedure is still necessary as it plays in here. So let's go ahead and change this to our tomato crop bottom destroyed procedure right there. Set this up to our event trigger and save this version, and just like that, we are good to go. However, we do need a trigger to play when the block is destroyed by a player, but once again, we want this to play when the player starts to destroy it. That way we can still figure out what stage it is in. So let's go ahead and add that trigger there. And we're going to get rid of the stage 0 part. So this is going to be tomato crop bottom player starts to destroy, create procedure. So when the player starts to destroy, the first thing we're going to do is get that game rule do tile drops. And if that is true, and the player is not in creative mode, then we're going to run our drops procedure. So the next thing we're checking is the block state to make sure it is the proper block state. This code right here shows you how to do it if you want to have the ability to get tomatoes from multiple versions of your block crop, but we only want it to drop from the highest version, and we are not using block states, so we can just get rid of all that, go in here, do this, and grab our custom components and make sure that it is our fully grown stage 7 crop. Next, we're going to check if the main hand of the event target entity has fortune. We do not have to check the offhand, as you are not allowed to destroy blocks with the items in your offhand. You're only allowed to use the items in your offhand, so really no reason to check the offhand here. And if that is the case, then we are going to set local rand num to random. And if that is the case, we're going to check for fortune 3 to 1. So to streamline our code, I have some repeats here just so that we're not running the same thing. Technically, you could just copy and paste this and put it in here again, and you've done the same thing, but I think the repeat or the loop code here just works a little bit better. So we're going to repeat 3 times, setting a random number between 0 and 1, and then if it is, say, less than 0.57, which I think is roughly correct for mirroring vanilla fortune rates, then we are going to spawn in another tomato. We can go ahead and collapse these. And that will spawn up to 5 tomatoes, depending on how they broke it. And then, of course, we also want it to drop at least 1 seed. Else, if it is any other version of our crop that's not fully grown, all we're going to do is drop a single seed. We can go ahead and save this mod element. That's in when player starts to destroy. We can save that again. And we can do that for every single one of our crops. However, before you do that, I do highly recommend that you finish all of the triggers that this one needs, so that when we go through all of the rest of our crops, we can just kind of, put all of them in all at once. So the next thing we're going to need is a neighbor block changes. We can call this tomato block bottom, get rid of the stage 0, neighbor block changes, create procedure. This one's going to be incredibly simple. If the block below you, or the block below our crop, is not farmland, and once again, if you have multiple types of farmland, you can use a tag here, then we're going to call our tomato crop destroyed procedure here, play the crop breaking sound, and then remove the block and spawn break particles. We can go ahead and save that. And the final triggers we need to add are actually over here in advanced properties. This block can be fertilized by bone meal. There is going to be no condition on when it can be used. And then on bone meal success, we are going to, of course, have to make our own procedure. We're going to call this tomato crop bottom bone meal success, create procedure. And for this one, we're actually going to need a local variable rand, and we're going to set that rand to a random number right away. If we are using block states, we're going to check what block state we are in, but we are not using block states. So I'm going to quickly convert this to check the actual block that we have. And just like that, we have it all worked out. So let me walk you through real quick what we're doing here. First, we're going to, of course, check which state we're at right now. And if we are less than 25, we're going to increment up by 1. If we're less than 0.5, we're going to increment up by another 1. And then 7.5, another 1, another 1. And I said 1, but that's actually never the case. When you have an 8-stage crop, you are always incrementing by at the very least 2 growth stages. So we're going to skip right over stage 1 and go to stage 2, and then to stage 3, and then to stage 4, and then to stage 5. Now, it's very important to keep in mind, if you're going from a crop that does not have a top to a crop that does have a top, make sure you're placing that top in as well, like we are doing here. So this should be all good to go. We can collapse that. Now, if we're going from 1, we're going to at least 3. So this is 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we can go ahead and collapse that as well. That's all good to go. Now we are going from 2, which also does not have a top, to 4, 5, 6, and 7. Keep in mind, this 7 right here is our fully grown stage. So our next one is only going to have 3 possibilities that it could increment to. So we're going from 3, which does have a top already, so we no longer need to place that on there, to 5, 6, and then 7. We can collapse that, and do note that our numbers have changed here, so it's still an equal chance of getting all of them. And then we're going to go from 4 to either 6 or 7, 50-50. And then we're going, if we are at stage 5 or 6, we're just going to bring it immediately up to the highest growth stage possible. And just like that, our bone meal success is all good to go. So we can go ahead and save this mod element. And now, unfortunately, you're going to have to go into all of your bottoms and pretty much redo everything we've just done here, setting the bone meal success procedure, coming in here, adding the tick update procedure, when player starts to destroy procedure. This procedure technically, like I said, does not need to be filled in, but the neighbor block changes does need to be filled in. So do that for every single one of your bottom procedures, or excuse me, all of your bottom crops, except for the fully grown one, the stage 7, which doesn't need any of it, except for the neighbor block changes and the player starts to destroy. So at the stage 7 one, we don't need to tick update, and we don't need any sort of bone meal success because this cannot be bone meal, but we do need to check that neighbor block, and we do need to know when the player has started to destroy it. So just go through all of the other ones except for that fully grown one and make them look exactly like that first one that we had just done. And just like that, we are good to go. Do note that if you are using block states, even though technically this one is your fully grown crop, you're still going to need to set all of the bone meal stuff, the triggers, the update tick, all of that, because this is also going to be acting as a young crop. So make sure that it's ticking if this is a block state block, and that you have all of these other procedures in here. But you're also going to want to add another procedure on can bone meal be used, and check that you are not at stage 0. As long as you're not at stage 0, bone meal can be used and you're all good to go. So make sure you add that check in there. That's technically the only extra check you're going to need if you're using block states, but other than that, it's actually much less code to use block states. Just like that, we have everything for the bottom part of our crop good to go, but we still need to use stuff for the top part of our crop. So we're going to come in here, and when bone mealed, we're going to use tomato crop top on bone meal success, create procedure. And the easiest way to handle this is just to call the procedure for the one being bone mealed below it at the block below it. Instead of just recreating the entire thing we did before, it just, saves us a lot of time and energy if we just go into the advanced procedures right here and call our same procedure from before at the block below ours. So let's go ahead and save this, and just like that, we're already done with our first procedure. Now, even though I told you to tick randomly for this top part, the top crop is actually not going to tick randomly at all, so we don't need a tick update, but we do need a when neighbor block changes. Once again, we can drop the stage part. We just need tomato crop top, neighbor block changes, create procedure. So this is how we can handle it if you're using block states. First, check that the block below you is our tomato bottom block, but because we have multiple blocks when we are not using block states, we can't do something that simple. We have to use our tag that we created. So go ahead and drag and drop this block in here, get rid of this, replace it with this, and we're going to call this double crop tutorial, or whatever your mod namespace is, tomato _ crop, or whatever you decided to call your tag. If the block below us is in that tag, then we're going to check which block we are in and increment to the following stage. Else, if the block below us is not tagged as tomato crop, we're just going to destroy ourselves because we shouldn't exist and spawn in the break particles. So I'm going to go ahead and convert all of this to how it should look if you're not using block states, and then I'll catch you later. So these are all of our tomato bottoms that have a top on them. We're going to add another else here, because if it's any of the other types of tomatoes, it could potentially still keep itself. So we're going to want to duplicate this and put it in right there at the bottom. We can then get rid of all of these, and we're going to want to make sure that this is matching the top piece with the bottom piece. So just copy and paste this, making sure that we are matching our top with our bottom. And just like that, we are good to go. So as long as you're using the as long as you're not using block states, then this should be pretty much exactly how you want it to look, except you want this to be your namespace and then your tag name. Let's go ahead and save this mod element. Next up, we need a when player starts to destroy, but I would actually just recommend duplicating your bottom procedure starts to destroy, because it's really going to be the exact same. The only difference is at the very end, we're going to add a block that destroys our bottom crop. So let's go ahead and show you how that looks. So here we are, we have the exact same procedure. The only difference is we're going to add an action here where we destroy the block. If we scroll down, it's around here somewhere. Right here, remove block at and spawn particles, but we want this to be y minus 1. So let's go ahead and duplicate this, change it to a minus and call it 1, and there we go. So whenever the top block is destroyed, we are then also going to destroy the block below it. Save that mod element. Make sure that we add that in here to the when player starts to destroy. Make another trigger here for when block destroyed by explosion. Call that tomato top crop top block destroyed. We can cut that by explosion off because I don't think it's important. Create the procedure. And like I said, we could run some things, try and get some drops from it, but it's not going to work because the block is already destroyed. So really all we need here is that end block there, where we are removing the block below us and spawning the break particles. So once you have something like this, you are all good to go ahead and save that. Make sure that that is in when block destroyed by explosion. And just like that, we are good to go. So let's go ahead and save that mod element. Open up the rest of our tomato crop tops and make sure that we have them all the same way. So tomato crop top on bone meal success, triggers on neighbor block changes, player starts to destroy, and then of course destroyed by explosion. Save that and make sure you do that for every single one of your tops except for your stage 7 top, because your stage 7 cannot be bone mealed. It does actually need a when neighbor block changes trigger, as well as a player destroys trigger and an explosion trigger. It just doesn't need the bone meal trigger here. So go ahead and save that. And then for the rest of these here, these 3, we're going to make sure that they all look like our first one. And just like that, our crop should be completely done. Now you might want to add the ability to compost your tomatoes and your seeds, and if you do, all you have to do is add an item extension here. I would call it tomato extension, or whatever item you have extension. Select that item there, and then change this chance of compost success to whatever you want it to be. Any of the rest of that stuff is totally up to you. Let's go ahead and launch and make sure that our tomato crops are working properly. So we can right click these on the sand, right click them on the grass, anywhere else, just see if it works, and it's not working. But as soon as we right click on the farmland, it gives us that advancement and indeed plants in our tomato crop. Let's go ahead and set the random tick speed to a higher value and then see if they grow properly. And you'll notice that pretty much right away, they grow exactly as we expected and exactly as we intended. Next up, let's break this top piece right here and see if it properly destroys the block below it. Does not look like it did. It does look like we have an issue. If we break the top part here, it only drops seeds. I have a feeling we have the wrong procedure selected. So let's go into our tomato crop top, stage 7, triggers, tomato crop top, player starts to destroy. And right here, we can immediately see our problem. We forgot to change the check from the bottom part to the top part. So make sure that you have that part changed from the bottom to the top, and that should work no problems. So that should fix our problem of not getting any tomatoes when we destroy the top. However, when we destroy the bottom, we get tomatoes, no problem, and a seed, which is awesome. Pretty much exactly how we wanted it to work. It also seems like if we are in creative mode for some reason, it doesn't destroy this one down below it, which is weird. At the end of the day, if it doesn't break the bottom one only in creative mode, that's not really an issue. It's just something that we would like not to happen if possible. It seems as though maybe we don't have a bounding box for this crop, so let's double check that. Yep, it does seem as though I accidentally deleted the bounding box for the tomato crop bottom stage 3, so hopefully you guys don't have that problem, but I'm gonna go ahead and double check. Yeah, it looks like when I duplicated that, these probably all got rid of their bounding boxes, so we're just gonna add in more bounding boxes so that you actually have the ability to destroy them. If you ever have this problem, then there's the solution. So here we are. Let's go ahead and destroy this bottom crop here, and it works as intended. I went ahead and added the tomato crop block destroyed procedure to right here, the same one that is right here. So let's go ahead and test this one more time in creative mode and see if it still leaves this bottom piece. Nope, that seems to have fixed things, so that's 100% what you should do to get that working properly. Let's go ahead and break this top piece in survival mode, and now we are getting tomatoes, so that is fixing our problem. We just want to wait through all of the rest of these growth stages to make sure that there are no other problems. While we are waiting, let's go ahead and see if we can speed things up with some bone meal. So if we bone meal this stage 0 crop, that seems to have worked just fine. If we bone meal this top part of the crop, which looks like I also accidentally deleted its bounding box. Luckily, however, it is a quick fix. So if we go ahead and bone meal the top of this piece right here, it doesn't seem to be working. Let's go ahead and check why. I see that it's because this procedure doesn't actually exist, and it actually told me about that right down there. I imported this procedure from my actual mod, A.C.E Overhaul. You guys shouldn't have this problem because there is no way for you to select a procedure that does not exist, but it does seem that I have this problem because it is not selected as bottom. But if we save that mod element and try again, suddenly our top procedure is now working just fine. Perfect. Just like that, I would say that our crops are working just so long as when we break this block down here, it destroys the entire thing. Because that was fully grown, it gave us our tomatoes, which is perfect. But if we destroy this, it just gives us the seed, gives us the tomatoes. This is working perfectly. And as an added little bonus here, I'm going to show you how to make it so that your tomato seeds will drop from grass whenever it is destroyed. So what we're going to have to do is come into the game here, pick block this, and find the name. This is called short grass. So what we're going to do here is add a new loot table and call it short grass loot table. This is going to be a Minecraft namespace of blocks. Drop the loot table here, and it's just going to be called blocks/short grass. This is a loot table that already exists in vanilla Minecraft, but we want to overwrite it. We want to make it so that it has a chance of dropping seeds, wheat seeds of course, and of course our tomato seeds as well whenever being destroyed. We do want this to be affected by fortune, and because it's affected by fortune, we want it to play only without silk touch. We need to add another loot table, however, that plays with silk touch, and when it is broken with silk touch, we want to drop that short grass item, which actually, weirdly enough, I believe is called tall grass in here. It's super confusing, but it's not actually tall grass. Tall grass is called double tall grass. It's super confusing, but make sure that you have this set as tall grass and make sure that that is only with silk touch. Now at this point, our seeds are going to drop every time 100% of the time. So we're going to want to add another thing here and make it so that it drops air, which won't actually drop an air block. It will just drop nothing. And we can make it so that our air is more likely to drop or less likely to drop. This is completely up to you. If you set this to 2, you have a 50% chance of getting a seed and a 50% chance of getting air, and then a 50% chance of getting wheat or tomato if you get a seed, or a 25% chance of getting tomato seeds and a 25% chance of getting wheat seeds. Personally, I want it to be about a 10% chance of tomato and a 10% chance of wheat. That sets this at 20%. or 1 in 5. So we want this to be at 8. That sets it at about 80%, or 8 in 10, or 4 in 5. So there we go. We can go ahead and save this, and that should now make it so that when we destroy grass, we get our tomato seeds. Luckily, this is pretty easy to test. If we just go into survival mode and start breaking things, there we go. We got some wheat seeds, and there we go. We got some tomato seeds. So just like that, everything we have done seems to be working properly. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed and appreciated this video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And if you have any recommendations on what you would like to see next, go ahead and drop that in the comments as well. If you thought this tutorial was helpful, I would really appreciate it if you liked. And if you want to see more, definitely subscribe. But until next time, peace out.